I've been commissioned to make a bath tray, something to keep the essentials close while you're in the tub. The brief: match the wood in the room, fit the bath, hold a tablet, and the rest is up to me. I think these sea anemone shells have a really interesting shape, and it'd be nice if I could incorporate that in a design somehow. I've picked out a board of rough sawn European white oak, which should hopefully be a good match for the rest of the wood in the room. It's not quite wide enough for the tray though, so I'm chopping it up so it can be glued back together into a wider board. The pieces are milled flat first, so I've got good reference surfaces to work from until I can figure out the best orientation for the grain. I quite like these lighter sapwood areas, they remind me a bit of waves on a beach. After a bit more cutting down to size, the two pieces are glued, clamped and left overnight. Any remaining dry glue is removed and then it's put through the thicknesser to clean it up. Now the board is trimmed down to final dimensions and I can move on to the more interesting parts of the build. The plan is to make some plywood from oak and walnut, which should give a nice contrast for the main features of the project. Plywood usually has perpendicular layers, but for this, the grain goes in the same direction. This means it won't get the same strength and anti-warping characteristics of proper plywood, but it'll do for this. Now I'm raiding the wood pile for some black walnut, which also gets cut down into strips. The best way I've found of making these thin veneers is to use a really sharp blade on the bandsaw, which does a pretty good job when passing through the thicknesser on a sledge to clean them up and nail the 2mm thickness. Several hours later, I've got 3 stacks of 2 oak and 1 walnut. This little press is great for small glue ups, so the wooden glue sandwich is stacked up and squeezed together until I end up with 5 plywood panels. The centrepiece of the project is inspired by the anemone shells. It's going to be made of triangular sections of the plywood and radiate out from a central point. It's done this way so all the grain can go in the right direction. A table saw sled would definitely be a safer way to cut these, but that's still on the to-do list. Instead, I cut an offcut of plywood to the angle I needed, and then drilled a hole and put a dowel in as a hard stop. I'm not recommending this method, there are much safer options, however, it got the job done. Now I'm using a laser cutter to engrave a design onto some 2mm plywood. This acts as both an alignment guide and a backing surface to attach all the segments to. Using both wood glue and CA glue means the pieces can be assembled quickly without needing loads of clamps. Now that everything's dry, it's over to the CNC router, where I'm hoping the magic's going to happen. Firstly, a shallow outline pass that locks in the position. The 1/8 end mill is swapped out for a 1/4 inch bullnose bit, which gets started on the roughing pass to remove the majority of the material. And after that, a smaller 1/8 bullnose bit is used to carve out the intricate details. This might take a while. And take a while it did. Altogether, the CNC spent about 5 hours doing its thing. As the final stages are cut, the design really starts to appear. A curve is carved into each segment, cutting through the different coloured layers and exposing a pattern that hopefully resembles a sea anemone shell. With the shell insert finished, the tray body still needs a few holes and recesses. My CNC machine isn't quite big enough to fit the whole board in. Instead, laser cut plywood templates are quick to make and work really well for routing jobs like this. The first cutout is a hole with a slot for a wine glass to sit in. The template is fixed down with double-sided tape, and most of the waste is removed with a jigsaw first. Now I grab the palm router with a spiral template bit. It's got a bearing which rides up against the plywood guide and really cleans up the shape. Next are 2 recessed areas, which are a bit trickier because they only go halfway into the board. So the router gets upgraded with a plunge base, which can be slowly lowered, and a 2-flute straight cutter hogs out most of the material while staying clear of the edges. Several passes are made, each going a little deeper until the final depth is reached. After that, another bearing guided template bit cuts right up to the template, leaving a clean, deep recess. Now it's over to the router table, where I use a hefty 1/2 inch spiral compression template bit to round off the corners. Lastly, a recess is needed for the shell insert itself. This is another job where having the right tool, in this case a large router subbase, would make things a lot easier and safer, since it could support the router from both sides, irregardless of where the cutter was. That's still on the to-do list as well. So I stick down a few extra strips of plywood alongside the template so the router has something to ride on when needed. Shower time. Now the shell insert can be glued in and clamped. I'm also adding an extra cutout which isn't shown, which goes in between the insert and the clamping block to make sure pressure is being evenly applied where it's needed. While the glue dries, I can move on to the other features. These are made from walnut to continue the contrasting light and dark theme. A backboard and a small prop strip will give the tablet somewhere to sit, at hopefully a comfortable reading angle. A couple of walnut rings are cut out to fit into the recessed holes. By now the glue has dried and the insert is looking pretty good. Pressing it flat though has opened up a small crack. The insert must have had a slight curve in it, which can happen when a lot of material is machined away from one side of a board. A bit of glue and sawdust sorts this out easily enough. I've also made a small walnut semicircle to press into the shell, which now reminds me a little bit of a Japanese symbol. As a 3D shape, the shell has a really nice tactile feel to it, but unfortunately it wouldn't be very practical as part of a bath tray, so the whole thing gets filled with epoxy to level it out. It's now a couple of days later and the epoxy is fully cured. The CNC machine makes a pretty good tool for surfacing off the excess. A belt sander smooths everything out and removes the remaining machining marks. Here I'm using a roundover bit and some sandpaper to make the edges nice to the touch. I've slightly messed up the order of operations here because I still need to cut a couple of dominoes in for the backboard. That definitely would have been easier before the roundover, but I managed to get them in straight anyway. The whole tray is wiped down with water to raise the grain, and then it's sanded back to 180 grit. The epoxy section is masked off and sanded separately, starting at 180 grit and working all the way up to 7000. Now it's polished with a plastic polishing compound until it turns crystal clear. This little laser engraver is perfect for adding my logo, since it just sits on top of the item and I can send a file over from my phone. If you're enjoying the video so far, subscribing to the channel really helps me out. Now all the walnut pieces are ready to be glued in place. Wood glue and plenty of clamps make sure everything is solid, with no gaps for water to sneak into. The finish is especially important on this project, since we'll be living in a steamy bathroom and getting splashed regularly. I used 2 coats of Rubio Monocoat hard wax oil, working it thoroughly into the grain to seal up the pores in the oak. Lastly, to stop the tray from sliding off the bath, I'm bundling these rubber pads for the client to stick on. I've still got quite a few pieces of the plywood left over, so I've had an idea for an extra item which will complement the project nicely. The CNC cuts out 14 ribs and a top cap from the plywood sandwich, plus a bottom cap from walnut. Once glued together, they form a barrel light that fits nicely into the recesses and continues the light and dark theme. This thing's actually really strong. I put 13 kilograms on the top to weigh it all together, and I think it probably could have taken more. Now that I've seen it in place, I think the light's probably a bit too big, so I've made a smaller version as well. The bigger one can go on the windowsill and add to the ambience. I found these splashproof, rechargeable LED candles to finish it off. The shadows they cast work really nicely with the shell pattern. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. In the end, the tray feels modern, practical, and a little bit sculptural too, which is what I was hoping for. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.